allies meet at the White House.
It is a great honor to welcome you to the People's House, the White House.
The president welcomes German Chancellor Angela Merkel after a rocky start to their relationship. Concern for the poor, how President Trump's budget proposal could affect those in need. 24 hours for the Lord. Pope Francis kicks off a worldwide initiative. And raising hopes in Ireland. These monks are doing something that hasn't been tried for more than 450 years. On EWTN News Nightly for Friday, March 17, 2017. Good evening and happy St. Patrick's Day. I'm Wyatt Goolsby in for Lauren Ashburn. A Catholic group says it's troubled by President Trump's proposed budget cuts. Catholic Relief Services says the reduction of foreign aid would have devastating effects, but some Republicans say the cuts may be an act of justice to slash the national debt. Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reports tonight. Jason?
Wyatt, the Trump proposal cuts billions of dollars from diplomacy and foreign aid. This is just the first look at the president's goals. It's Congress which has the power of the purse and must debate, write, and then pass the actual budget.
President Trump's budget would slash $17 billion from the State Department and the U.S. Agency for International Development.
Presidents tend to lay out their budget in the starkest terms.
Catholic Relief Services Vice President Bill O'Keefe condemns the proposed cuts. The federal government gave his charity $262 million in 2015 to help people around the world. He says any cuts to foreign aid jeopardizes U.S. security, creating a vacuum in fragile states that can be exploited by our nation's enemies, leading to the need for much more costly in money and lives military intervention. But Catholic Congressman Jeff Fortenberry says it's a matter of justice to cut our national debt.
Long-term structural debt is a tax increase, and it hits the poor and those who are on fixed income, seniors, the hardest because it's potentially inflationary. We also sell a lot of this debt overseas, which creates foreign policy entanglements, and it's unjust in the sense that we're paying for the way in which we live now by pushing it off to children and grandchildren.
A thought shared by Congressman Warren Davidson.
It's not compassionate to bankrupt our country. And really, when you look at the budget that's proposed, we're really only talking about a third of what our government's going to spend next year. It's the discretionary budget. The other part is mandatory or automatic spending. And that autopilot path we're on is a path to bankrupt our country.
Still, Democrats slam the budget.
It throws billions of dollars at defense while ransacking America's investment in jobs, education, innovation, clean energy, and life-saving medical research. It will leave our nation weakened.
O'Keefe says we must not balance the budget on the backs of the poor. He says cutting foreign aid doesn't even make a dent in the deficit. Wyatt?
Jason, you've been talking to a number of Republicans today. Do they all support the president's proposal?
Not exactly. Oklahoma Representative Steve Russell tells me he was worried about a proposal to privatize air traffic control. And Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole tells me he doesn't like the cuts to the National Institutes of Health.
Capitol Hill correspondent Jason Calvi reporting. Thanks, Jason. Members of the Republican Study Committee meet with President Trump to discuss the Obamacare replacement plan. Afterwards, they announced their unanimous support.
We're pleased to see the block grants make it into place. We're also pleased with the pro-life provisions that are in this legislation.
Block grants are a feature of the bill that would return power to the states, allowing them to decide how health care dollars are spent to help the sick and the poor. The legislation is on track to move to the House Rules Committee early next week. Health Secretary Tom Price is trying to persuade remaining Republicans to get together and collaborate on the health care overhaul.
I look forward to working with them and our friends on the other side of the Capitol to make certain that, again, we move in the direction of patient-centered health care, not government-centered health care.
Price spoke to reporters before a Friday meeting with House Republicans. President Trump has been talking with GOP leadership about potential changes, but Secretary Price wouldn't reveal the revisions. President Trump welcomes German Chancellor Angela Merkel to the White House to discuss ISIS, NATO, and trade. The two clashed during the presidential campaign, which is why their first ever meeting is considered an important step to restarting their relationship.
Send a good picture back to Germany, please. Make sure.
President Trump concerned with appearances in his meeting this morning with Angela Merkel, a marked contrast from when he was running for office, and he accused her of ruining Germany for allowing an influx of refugees from Syria.
I think what she did to Germany is a disgrace.
The president making a concerted effort to find common ground. The two leaders detailed their commitments to fighting ISIS, even as Trump linked the issue back to immigration.
That immigration security is national security. We must protect our citizens from those who seek to spread terrorism, extremism, and violence inside our borders.
President Trump also repeated a call for NATO members to commit 2% of their budgets to defense spending. Merkel's Germany lags significantly behind.
It is very unfair to the United States. These nations must pay what they owe.
Chancellor Merkel agrees.
Germany needs to increase expenditure. We committed to this 2% goal until 2024.
President Trump credits his win in November to his support for the military, saying it will be stronger than ever before, although hopefully not needed. He also addressed NAFTA, saying trade was another reason he won the election.
Our trade deals are going to be good, solid deals, not deals that lead to closing plants and tremendous unemployment.
President Trump denies that his trade policies are isolationist, telling a German reporter it's fake news. He also repeated his wiretapping claim, suggesting he and Merkel were wiretapped by the Obama administration. Secretary of State Rex Tillerson promises the United States is prepared to take military action against North Korea if provoked, saying it's time for a new policy.
The policy of strategic patience has ended. We're exploring a new range of diplomatic, security, and economic measures. All options are on the table.
Tillerson is in the midst of a three-country tour of Asia where tensions are high following North Korea's recent missile launches. Now, the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team is covering in today's world. The U.S. military denies one of its airstrikes in Syria killed dozens of people attending prayers at a mosque. Opposition groups blame the U.S.-led coalition for killing at least 40 people, but U.S. forces say their airstrike actually targeted and killed several al-Qaeda militants. Parts of Syria canceled Friday prayers after the bombing. Two suicide bombing target troops and local officials in Afghanistan. A suicide bomber struck a military checkpoint, killing one soldier and injuring 10. Another bomber killed the brother of a local religious leader. The Taliban claimed responsibility for the first bombing. A military helicopter attacks a boat off the coast of Yemen that was packed with Somali refugees. The strike left at least 42 people dead. The survivors were taken to detention centers. Shiite rebels accuse a Saudi-led coalition of carrying out the attack. The UN Refugee Agency said on Twitter it was appalled by this tragic incident. Pope Francis says confessors are called to go to the peripheries of evil and sin to bring God's mercy to everyone.
Sempre in rapporto alla verità, al bene e alla volontà del Signore.
The Holy Father says a good confessor is one who prays, discerns, and evangelizes, someone who is, above all, a friend of the Good Shepherd. The Pope made the remarks to the Vatican's tribunal, which handles questions regarding the forgiveness of sins. The pontiff is leading by example. He later went to confession himself, then administered the sacrament to others. Pope Francis is participating in a special penitential service in St. Peter's Basilica. This evening's event kicks off the 24 Hours for the Lord initiative that will take place worldwide next weekend. Vatican correspondent Mary Shevlin joins us from Rome. Mary, the Holy Father usually gives a homily at the penitential service, but he didn't this year. Why not?
Why, no reason was officially given by the Holy See press office, but it's not uncommon for popes to occasionally shake things up. And by doing that this evening, Pope Francis really put the emphasis on recollection and penance and reflection, something very obviously suitable for a penitential liturgy. And so the silence spoke volumes, as it were, and how moving was it to see the Holy Father walk down the steps, make his way across the basilica, and kneel down to say his own confession. After that, he made his way to the confessional himself, and for 50 minutes, 50 minutes, he heard confessions from 7 different people. We know that there were 3 men and 4 women that were in line, all laity. So a lot happened this evening. No homily from Pope Francis, but so much was said.
Well, tell us how the faithful who are not there in Rome with the Pope can take part in the 24 Hours for the Lord event.
why this was something started by the Pontifical Council here in Rome for the new evangelization, something inspired by Pope Francis, to have 24 hours where church doors are literally left open all night with Eucharistic adoration. There are specific churches and dioceses all over the world. So get in touch with your local ordinary or your local priest and ask which churches in your diocese will be open for this penance service for the Lord. And you don't even have to go to confession, let's say, but it's also a moment just for prayer, maybe to talk with a priest, just to sit in silence. And there's also a hashtag for the event, 24 hours for the Lord. And our Sunday Visitor has printed out a special pamphlet that you can download from their website, a PDF for free, to help you examine your conscience.
Very good. Mary Shevlin, our EWTN News Nightly Vatican correspondent. Thanks, Mary.
Thank you, Wyatt.
The handwritten notes of a speech then Cardinal Jorge Bergoglio delivered to his fellow cardinals before he was elected pope is being released for the first time. Havana's then Archbishop Cardinal Ortega was so taken by the short speech that he asked Bergoglio if he had a copy of it. He didn't, but wrote some notes down. Bergoglio wrote the future pope should be a man who, quote, helps the church go to the existential peripheries and helps it to be a fertile mother who lives from the sweet and comforting joy of evangelizing. The Archdiocese of Havana released the note this week on the 4th anniversary of the election of Pope Francis. Coming up, religious minorities targeted by ISIS.
We make sure that the American public understands just how severe this crisis is.
How U.S. groups are joining together to stop genocide. And living your faith in Hollywood. A best-selling novelist and screenwriter tells us about being a Christian conservative in a sometimes unwelcoming environment. I arise today through a mighty strength, the invocation of the Trinity, through belief in the threeness, through confession of the oneness of the Creator of creation. That's from St. Patrick's Breastplate, a prayer attributed to one of Ireland's most beloved saints. It's been 1 year since the U.S. government declared ISIS responsible for genocide against religious minorities, including Christians and Yazidis. In defense of Christians, the Genocide Coalition and other groups joined lawmakers on Capitol Hill yesterday to ask the Trump administration to help stop the religious persecution.
We need to start talking about getting the dots connected and to understand the nature of the enemy that we're all dealing with here.
If it is not designated, then future generations will not know that anything ever occurred.
The Genocide Coalition says not enough ISIS survivors have received assistance from the American people. The Knights of Columbus is one of the groups that helped convince the U.S. government to make last year's genocide declaration. Joining us now is Andrew Walther, Vice President of Communications and Strategic Planning for the Knights of Columbus. So Andrew, it's been 1 year since the declaration of the genocide, and yet the genocide continues. Have there been any progress?
Well, you know, for the immediate aftermath of that declaration, we were told by people in Iraq and personally talking to some of the UN and US officials there that they weren't really concerned about the communities but only about the individuals. Now, I got a call just a week or so ago from an archbishop there who said that in the last couple of months things have started to change. There's a new openness from the US government to helping the people there that are Christians and other religious minorities in a more direct way. So things seem to be moving in the right direction.
Representative Jeff Fortenberry told us yesterday about a bill he's drafting that would allow prosecution of groups that are accessories to ISIS. That's nice if it happens, but what else do you think Congress and the White House needs to do from here?
Well, you know, that's an important piece, is prosecuting, bringing the perpetrators to justice. Another important piece, Congressman Chris Smith and I were there in December, and he has a bill, H.R. 390, with bipartisan co-sponsorship. Representative Eshoo, a Democrat, and a number of other Democrats have co-sponsored it as well. And this would direct the aid that the U.S. government is giving directly to these minority communities, including the Christians that were targeted for genocide and have been too often overlooked, especially in direct UN and U.S. assistance.
President Trump's updated executive order on refugees eliminated the religious exemption. What do you think that means for persecuted Christians who are trying to get into the U.S.?
Well, you know, interestingly, President Obama's outlook on refugees from Syria, for example, was to prioritize minority refugees. And of course, it didn't work out that way at all. 98.2% of them were from the majority population, not the minority population in fiscal 2016. So I think that what's really important is the outcome, more than stating that there's going to be specific help for people that have survived genocide. What's important is if the numbers start to actually align with the population, people should be getting it at least at the rate in which they existed in the population prior to the start of the war in Syria and in Iraq, and in the case of genocide survivors, probably perhaps at an even greater rate.
It seems like things are getting better with at least last couple of months.
Absolutely. I mean, that's what we're hearing. The people in Iraq, the Christians in Iraq, are very hopeful that things are going to begin to change in a way that means they are no longer left behind. And that's what's happened up until now. And in too many of the direct U.S. and UN policies, these communities have just not received any kind of direct assistance. And so the fact that they see that changing and the fact that there could be some positive outcomes in other ways, I think that's what people need to be excited about. That's the opportunity here. We used the right words a year ago, and this year a new Congress and a new administration have the opportunity to use the right actions.
Andrew Walther, Vice President of Communications and Strategic Planning for the Knights of Columbus. Thanks so much for talking with us.
Thank you.
Up next, boycotting Beauty and the Beast, why Christians may find the film objectionable. And a group of Benedictine monks from Oklahoma find a new mission in Ireland. Several Christian groups call for a boycott of Disney's new movie, Beauty and the Beast. The controversy comes after the director announced the live-action remake would contain a, quote, exclusively gay moment. The film opens in theaters today. Joining us now is Stephen Graydonis, the creator of DecentFilms.com and movie critic for the National Catholic Register. Stephen, what do parents need to know before taking their young children to this movie?
This version of Beauty and the Beast is not the same as the 1991 animated classic. It follows the same structure, sometimes beat for beat, line for line, and shot for shot. But compared to the 1991, it's got some added scenes, some added details. It's somewhat padded compared to the original. And I would say that there is a fair amount, more than I expected, frankly, from this version of Beauty and the Beast, of innuendo, of double entendres, and really inappropriate humor.
Yes, your review had noted that a lot more sexual innuendos in this Beauty and the Beast than, frankly, any other Disney movie. Do you think this indicates a trend for the future?
Well, yes and no. I think that this version of Beauty and the Beast is very much the product of its director, Bill Condon, who is also the screenwriter for Chicago and the director of Kinsey. He is an openly gay filmmaker, and he wanted to bring these themes to this film. But I think there's no question that you always have to be on the alert about winks and what I call winks and nudges from Disney cartoons, from DreamWorks, from anybody else. There are themes that they want to work into these films that they can't work in as openly as they'd like, so they kind of keep them subtextual and subliminal for the most part. None of the specific gags in this film is really a big change. It's just the sheer number of them, from LeFou saying to Gaston, "Who needs her when you've got us?" to the moment when he bares his chest to reveal a bite mark from Gaston on his chest, to the closing gag where he dances with another man who is dressed in women's clothes earlier in the film.
Is that harmful to kids? I mean, would you take kids to see this?
I wouldn't. I think, first of all, it doesn't add anything valuable to the original. I think the 1991 animated film is one of Disney's all-time masterpieces. I think it's a great film. I would say kids are going to pick up on probably about half of the inappropriate humor here, and for me, that's too much. I'm not necessarily going to write off an entire film because of one inappropriate gag, but the sheer density of gags in this version of Beauty and the Beast is too much for my tastes.
You yourself are Catholic. How does your faith influence the way that you view movies?
I have been Catholic now for about 25 years. I became a permanent deacon in the Archdiocese of Newark a year ago, and my whole film writing career, the last 17 years, I've tried to bring the principles of my faith to bear in how I view movies in a way in accordance with the Vatican II document Inter Mirifica on the media of social communications. It's not, what I do is not a whole lot different from what a mainstream critic does. I'm interested in the good, the true, and the beautiful. but my faith does inform how I interpret what is good, true, and beautiful.
Well, we really appreciate you coming on to talk to us about this movie and about your faith and looking at movies in general. Stephen Greydonis, the creator of DecentFilms.com. Thanks for talking to us.
Thanks very much.
Faith is not a common theme in blockbuster movies, and many view Hollywood as sometimes unwelcoming to conservative Christian values. Andrew Klavan, best-selling novelist and screenwriter, joins us now from the National Review Institute's Idea Summit. Andrew, 2 of your books were made into movies. You're also a vocal conservative and Christian, and Hollywood's a pretty liberal town. What's it like being a Christian conservative in Hollywood?
It's pretty tough, I don't mind saying. I mean, you're dealing with people who kind of all just assume that everybody's on the same page all the time. You're walking into meetings where you're trying to sell material, and obviously it's a very difficult profession. Everybody wants to get into it. And you walk into those meetings, and frequently the conversation turns to politics, and the minute you express an opinion, even though I'm extremely polite, and I always express my opinions politely, it can end a meeting. It can basically mean that that sale is done. So you're working at a disadvantage in a field where there is no room for error. You know, you've got to get everything just right. You're working, the odds are against you a little bit.
Why is it there a bigger market, do you think, for conservative and family-friendly entertainment?
Well, I think there is. I think there is a large market for conservative and family-friendly entertainment. And I think, you know, I think it's easy to think that there's not a lot of family-friendly entertainment out there because there's so much trash. But the fact is there actually is a lot of stuff for kids being made, a lot of G-rated stuff being made. Where you really fall down is on realistic adult films with a message that's not politically correct necessarily, a message that maybe even just questions some of the politically correct ideas that are out there, and that's where I think we fall down. And I think it's not the left's fault for blacklisting us; it's our fault for not fighting back and not establishing the kinds of things we need: movie studios, award shows, review venues, and the whole infrastructure of entertainment. Conservatives have just kind of let go of that, and I think it's cost us dearly.
I want to ask you about your book, The Great Good Thing. A secular Jew comes to faith in Christ. You wrote about in the book your conversion from Judaism to Christianity. What was Hollywood's reaction to the book?
There was pretty much no reaction. I think that it's something that they just don't want to think about at all. And I think that, you know, it has changed. It has actually kind of raised my profile in certain ways, in an interesting way, because the book had a wide reach for people who might not read fiction, might not go to the kind of movies I write. I write very hard-boiled crime and movies and sometimes supernatural things. And so it actually broadened my reach to people, which was very gratifying. And people's reaction to the book was very gratifying because they kind of not just liked it, they kind of passionately loved it. And that was great. But in terms of walking into rooms in Hollywood, no one has said to me, "Oh, I read your book, get out." And no one has said to me, "Oh, I read your book, you're hired," either. So it really hasn't had much effect as far as I can tell.
Very good. Andrew Klavan, author and screenwriter, thanks so much for your insight. We appreciate it.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thanks.
While many religious communities are consolidating or closing down, one community is just getting started, and it's a big deal for Ireland. A group of Benedictine monks from Tulsa, Oklahoma moved to Ireland in 2012. A few weeks ago, the Bishop of Meath officially established a new monastery at Silver Stream. It's the first new monastery in the diocese since the Reformation in 1526. The monastery is raising hopes for Catholics in Ireland, an island once dubbed the land of saints and scholars. Our partners at the National Catholic Register have an in-depth look at the monks and how the monastery started. To read more, visit ncregister.com. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, I'm Wyatt Goolsby. We hope you have a great weekend and a safe and happy St. Patrick's Day. We leave you tonight with a look at the streets of Dublin, Ireland, right outside the iconic Temple Bar. The streets quickly filled up for the big St. Patrick's Day celebrations. Good night, and God bless.